Welcome to another exciting Werewolf Shifter Romance audiobook, The Ultimate Alpha's Sacrifice. A Catherine Stewart collection. Chapter 1.
The ancient meeting hall stood in the heart of the pack's territory. The air was thick with tension as Lyra stood before the gathering of wolves, each one representing different factions, some loyal to her father, others skeptical of her leadership. This was the moment Lyra had worked so hard for, a chance to prove herself, to unite the pack in peace. Lyra stood tall, her heart pounding as she surveyed the room. She had inherited her father's position after his sudden death, thrust into leadership at a time when the pack was vulnerable. The responsibility weighed heavily on her, but she had never wavered in her belief that the pack could thrive through peace, not war. She cleared her throat and addressed the gathered wolves, her voice steady despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. "Today we begin a new era for our pack," Lyra began, her eyes sweeping across the sea of faces. "An era where we choose unity over conflict. An era where peace will guide us to strength, and together we will build a future that honors the legacy of our ancestors." The words hung in the air, the quiet anticipation thick. Lyra had worked tirelessly to organize this peace summit, inviting representatives from rival factions to end the bloodshed that had torn them apart for generations. She wasn't like her father. He had ruled through strength and battle, but Lyra believed in a different path, one that valued collaboration over conquest. But her words were met with a murmur of disconhouse from the crowd. Lyra's gaze shifted to Danzo, a towering figure among the elders. His dark eyes bore into her, and his presence seemed to command a thousand. He was a force to be reckoned with, both respected and feared by many. He had always been a loyal advisor to her father, but his approach to leadership was far more aggressive than Lyra's. It was no secret that he believed in expansion through force, not peace. "Peace!" Danzo's voice rang out, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the silence. "How long must we wait, Lyra? How many more lives will be lost while we sit here, hoping our enemies will simply surrender?" His words were laced with disdain, his gaze narrowing. Your father understood the importance of strength. He knew that only through force would we command respect. And now you come to us with this naivety. Lyra's jaw clenched, but she kept her composure. "I believe in strength, Danzo, but not through violence. I believe in a strength that comes from unity, from choosing to live together rather than tearing each other apart." Danzo stepped forward, his powerful frame towering over Lyra. "Unity? What do you know of unity? You inherited your father's mantle, but you don't understand the wolves. We are survivors, not peacekeepers. You think the rival packs will bend to your will with words alone." Lyra's heart raced, but she held her ground. She could feel the weight of the room's eyes on her, sensing the divide between those who stood with her and those who questioned her ability to lead. "I know the pack," Lyra said, her voice firm but calm. "And I know that we are stronger when we stand together. But if we continue on the path of violence, we will only destroy ourselves. We've lost too much already, Danzo. We need peace, not more bloodshed." A low murmur rose from the crowd. Lyra felt the pressure mounting. Some of the pack members looked to Danzo with uncertain eyes, while others watched her, waiting for her to prove herself. "Peace, peace, peace!" Danzo scoffed, his lips curling into a sneer. "How long do you think we can survive on peace alone? The packs around us are growing stronger, and you want to sit idly by? You're blind, Lyra. You're weak." Lyra's gaze hardened, but before she could respond, a younger wolf spoke out. "He's right. We've been weak for too long. What have we gained from your vision? The others will destroy us while we sit here talking." The wolf's words landed like a punch, and Lyra could feel the tension in the room shift. Some of the younger pack members had been swayed by Danzo's rhetoric, and it was clear that her leadership was being questioned. "Tyrant," Lyra addressed the young wolf, her voice laced with both disappointment and sadness. "You were raised with the belief that strength is in battle, but I am asking you to see that true strength is in survival, in living together, not destroying everything around us." But Tyrant, who had once been like a friend to her, now looked away. His eyes were filled with doubt. "I don't know any more, Lyra. You're asking too much. If we don't fight, we lose everything. Lyra's heart sank. The challenge to her authority wasn't just coming from Danzo, it was spreading among the pack. She was losing them, bit by bit. Danzo watched, his smirk widening. You see, even those who trusted you are starting to question your decisions. How much longer can you keep up this charade? You may have inherited the title, but it's clear that you lack the backbone to lead us properly. Lyra's chest tightened, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She had worked so hard to prove that she could lead differently, to show them that peace wasn't a weakness, but now, the pack was splintering in front of her eyes. The support she had once felt from her people seemed like a distant memory. Lyra took a deep breath, her thoughts racing. She could feel the frustration and isolation building inside her. The weight of the summit, of her leadership, felt like it was too much to bear. Doubt crept in. Maybe Danzo was right. Maybe the pack wasn't ready for peace. Maybe she wasn't the leader they needed. Her voice shook, but she fought to keep control. I will not lead with fear, Danzo, and I will not let you turn this pack into what it was before. I will show you that strength lies in peace. But Danzo, seeing the cracks in her resolve, stepped closer, his tone darker. You're making a mistake, Lyra, and when you fail, I will be there, waiting to take control. With that, he turned on his heel and strode out of the summit room, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. The pack members exchanged uneasy glances. Some were uncertain, others more resolute in their beliefs. Lyra stood there, her heart heavy, the weight of the summit bearing down on her. The eyes of the pack were on her, but for the first time, she wasn't sure if she could hold them. Lyra stood at the edge of the palace, the chill of the morning air brushing against her skin, the wind whispering through the trees. She had hoped that the summit would bring the pack together, that her words would be enough to calm the storm raging within. But the weight of the situation pressed heavily on her chest. Her attempts to foster unity had been met with more resistance than she had anticipated. Every glance, every word from Danzo and his growing faction seemed to chip away at the peace she desperately tried to hold together. She had to speak to him alone. Danzo's influence was spreading like wildfire. He had always been a persuasive figure, and now, with his promises of strength and power, more and more wolves were drawn to him. It was no longer just his faction, the entire pack was starting to feel the shift. Those who once followed Lyra's vision for peace now questioned her ability to lead. They whispered about her softness, about how her reluctance to fight was weakening them. Lyra knew what they were saying. She had heard the murmurs, the doubts, and it was starting to feel like she was losing control. Her fingers clenched into fists as she made her way toward Danzo's house. He was alone, as usual, sitting in the shadows, his large frame casting an intimidating silhouette against the flickering light of the lanterns. He was watching her approach, his cold eyes calculating. She could feel the tension building before she even spoke, and her heart sank as she crossed the threshold into the dimly lit space. Lyra! Danzo's voice was low, but there was an edge to it, like a knife waiting to cut. What brings you here? Another round of diplomacy? Yes, Lyra said, trying to keep her voice steady, but the weight of everything felt heavier now that she was standing face to face with him. I need to speak with you, Danzo. We need to talk about the direction this pack is heading. The division. It's growing. I can't lead if we're not united. If you continue this path, we risk everything. Danzo leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. You think we risk everything by staying weak, by talking, by negotiating? You're too naive, Lyra. I told you before, you cannot protect us with words. Words don't win battles. They don't secure a future for this pack. Power does. Power will. I don't want to fight, Danzo, she said, her voice faltering slightly. I want us to be stronger, together, without shedding blood. I want to preserve what we've built, not destroy it. Danzo's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer to her. You think I want to destroy this pack? No, Lyra. I want to strengthen it, and that means I will take what's ours by force if necessary. You are the one who is too weak to see it. Could it be true? Was she too weak to lead? Would her refusal to fight make her pack crumble? I'm not weak, she said, her voice shaking with a mix of frustration and determination. I am trying to lead us through wisdom, through unity. The wolves respect me. They listen because I give them a chance to speak, to have a voice. If you keep pushing for war, you'll alienate them. And they won't follow you. Not forever. Danzo's lips curled into a mocking smile. You speak of wisdom, but you know nothing of what it takes to rule, Lyra. Your father, he would have never let you lead with such softness. He knew that the pack must survive above all else, even if it means bending to the will of power. He paused, his voice turning venomous. You think you can lead without bloodshed? Then let me show you how the world really works. The wolves won't follow a leader who can't protect them. You can't protect them, Lyra. Not like I can. Lyra's breath hitched. She felt the familiar sting of tears at the corners of her eyes, but forced them back. Danzo, she whispered, you don't understand. Leadership isn't just about power. It's about understanding, about seeing the bigger picture. If we fight now, if we destroy everything we've worked for, what's left? What's the point of winning a battle if we lose the pack in the process? Danzo stepped closer, towering over her, and for a moment, she felt the weight of his presence, his raw power. The point, Lyra, he said, his voice dangerously low, is that we win. If you want peace so badly, maybe you should step down and leave it to those who know how to truly protect this pack. Was this really happening? Was Danzo, the very wolf who had been a part of her father's inner circle, now ready to tear everything apart just to seize power? Lyra's resolve began to crack, and she felt the walls closing in on her. She looked at Danzo, her heart racing with both anger and fear, but deep down, a sinking realization began to settle in her chest. This wasn't just about power. It was about survival. I will not step down, Danzo, she finally managed to say, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. But if you continue down this path, you will destroy everything my father worked for. And you will destroy yourself in the process. Danzo's expression darkened, and he took a step back. Then we'll see who is left standing when all is said and done. She wanted to believe in peace, to fight for the unity her father had dreamed of. But as the sound of Danzo's retreating footsteps faded into the distance, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that the battle for her leadership was far from over. And she wasn't sure if she could keep the pack from tearing itself apart.
Chapter 2.
Lyra walked alone through the dense woods. The confrontation with Danzo and the elders still echoed in her thoughts. The anger, the accusations, the doubts. It all felt like a storm crashing around her, pulling her in different directions. She had never felt so uncertain in her life. Her father's legacy weighed heavily on her shoulders, but now, with the pack beginning to splinter, she found herself questioning everything she had believed in. Was she really cut out to be alpha? Or was Danzo right? Was she too weak to lead? Too idealistic for this world? She stopped beside an ancient oak tree, resting her hand against its rough bark as she closed her eyes. The weight of the decision that lay ahead seems unbearable. Her father had always made it look so easy. He had known what was best for the pack. But Lyra wasn't him. She was her own leader, trying to forge her own path, and sometimes it felt like that path was too narrow to walk. The confrontation had rattled her more than she had expected. Danzo's words, his confidence, had stung. They'd gotten under her skin. He had told her that peace wasn't enough, that it never would be, that strength came from power and aggression, and the pack would never respect her if she couldn't give him that. His words had festered in her mind, gnawing at her, even as she had tried to remain steadfast in her beliefs. Lyra inhaled deeply, letting the cool air fill her lungs as she leaned her forehead against the tree. The pressure was overwhelming, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of her role, the burden of her leadership. Her heart ached with the burden of the pack's needs and the gnawing desire to protect them without resorting to violence. A part of her wanted to walk away from it all, to leave the pack to Danzo and find peace away from the chaos. But that was selfish. She couldn't abandon them, not when they needed her most. Her father had never backed down from a challenge, and neither could she. But what was the right path? Should she continue to hold on to her vision of peace, even if it cost her everything? Or did she need to embrace Danzo's methods, to show the pack that she could be both strong and fierce, that she was capable of fighting when needed? As the wind rustled the leaves above her, Lyra realized something. The answer wasn't in either extreme. She didn't have to become like Danzo to prove her strength, nor could she ignore the harsh realities of their world. The pack needed balance. She needed to show them that she was capable of being both compassionate and strong, wise and fierce, that she could lead them with both her heart and her mind. Lyra's mind sharpened as the decision began to form. She had to confront the elders, face them all, including Danzo, and speak her truth. She had to show them that she would not be swayed, that her leadership would not crumble under pressure. If she truly wanted to lead, she would have to face the conflict head-on, not hide from it. Her heart still ached with doubt, but a sense of resolve began to settle within her. She could not let fear dictate her actions. She had to act with strength, but she also had to stay true to her values. Her leadership would be tested in ways she never expected, but she was ready to stand firm. As she walked back toward the heart of the pack, the burden seemed a little lighter, the weight of the future not quite so heavy. She was still uncertain, still filled with doubt, but she no longer felt quite so isolated. She had made her decision, and with it, she felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't the end of her journey, but it was a step toward something better, something stronger. The pack needed her, and now she was ready to lead them, not with fear, not with weakness, but with everything she had. Lyra's resolve had strengthened in that moment, and she could feel a shift in her mind as she began to walk toward her future, even if it was uncertain. She would confront Danzo, the elders, and anyone else who doubted her, not just with words, but with the conviction of her actions. The first step was to speak her truth, and Lyra was ready. The fire crackled low in the center of the meeting hall, its flickering flames casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across the faces of the elders seated in a semicircle. Lyra stood at the head of the table, her back straight, hands clasped behind her. She surveyed the faces before her. These were the wolves who had once trusted her, followed her vision of peace, but now the air felt thick with doubt. Her resolve faltered for a split second, but she quickly steadied herself. She was the alpha. She had earned her place, and she would fight for it. Fight for the pack that had once been united under her leadership. "Thank you all for gathering," Lyra said, her voice steady. "I know that there have been many concerns about the direction this pack is heading. It's not easy to confront these things, but it's necessary. We need to talk." The elder closest to Lyra, a wiry wolf named Talon, spoke first. His voice was sharp, tinged with frustration. "What we need, Lyra, is leadership. Real leadership. The pack is losing faith. Our enemies could be growing stronger, and you sit idly by, hoping they'll listen to words. We need to show them our power, our strength when the time comes." Lyra met Talon's gaze. "I am not sitting idly by, Talon. I am leading with trust, with compassion. Our strength lies not just in our power to fight, but in our ability to unite. We've had too many years of bloodshed, of pointless battles. It's time to build something that will last." Danzo snorted from the far side of the table, his dark eyes never leaving Lyra. He had been quiet until now, but Lyra knew this would be his moment to strike. She could feel his disdain radiating from him. "Unity!" Danzo's voice was dripping with sarcasm. "You think unity will protect us? This isn't a time for unity. Lyra, this is a time for strength. Your father knew this. He understood that power and fear are what keep our enemies in check. Your ideas," he waved a hand dismissively, "are nothing but weakness. And weakness will get us killed." Lyra's stomach churned, but she held her ground. She was used to Danzo's contempt, but hearing it so openly, in front of the others, stung more than she expected. "I know my father's legacy, Danzo. But he also believed in something more than just power. He believed in survival, yes, but also in the future. In what we can build together." Lyra's voice wavered only slightly, but she pushed through the doubt. "I am trying to protect our future. The pack can't survive on fear alone." The murmurs of agreement from a few of the other elders made Lyra's heart leap, but it was short-lived. Danzo was quick to press on. You think we can survive on kindness? On this dream of peace? The world isn't built on dreams, Lyra. He leaned forward, his gaze hardening. We're becoming too soft, too complacent. And now, the wolves outside are watching us, circling us. They see your weakness, and they will take advantage of it. We can't afford to wait for peace to magically appear. Lyra's hands tightened into fists at her sides. She had always known that Danzo's methods were harsher, but hearing him so openly dismiss everything she stood for left her feeling raw. I am not asking for peace without strength, Danzo, Lyra said, her voice firm. I am asking for a future where we fight for each other, not against each other. We are stronger together, united, and we can face any threat. But we will not be ruled by fear. A low growl rumbled from Danzo's chest. Then you are not the leader this pack needs, Lyra, he said, his voice low and dangerous. We need someone who can make hard decisions. Someone who isn't afraid to take control, to rule. Lyra's voice strong now and angry. You're wrong, Danzo. I will not lead through fear. And I will not allow you to tear this pack apart. Lyra could feel the weight of the elder's eyes on her, some uncertain, some already turning toward Danzo. She had to act quickly. Her mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. What had she been doing wrong? Was it possible that her vision of peace was a mistake? Was it too late for her to lead in a way that would bring the pack together? Finally, Talon spoke again, his voice resigned. Lyra, you have been a good alpha to us, but this pack needs more. Maybe not now, but when the time comes we will need someone who can make tough decisions. Lyra's chest tightened, but she couldn't back down. She couldn't let them win, not when she knew in her heart that she was right. Lyra said, her voice trembling only slightly, I will do whatever it takes to ensure this pack, this city is safe. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, the room was deathly still. She had to prove herself, not just to the elders, but to the entire pack. She would fight for them, and she would fight for the future she believed in. The meeting hadn't gone as she had hoped. The seeds of doubt were now firmly planted in the pack, and Lyra knew she had to do something more. The path ahead would not be easy, but she had made a promise, to herself, and to the pack, that she would lead them with peace, not violence.
Chapter 3.
The moon hung low in the night sky, casting a soft light on the trees surrounding the city's edge. Lyra stood at the gates, her breath steady but her heart racing. She had been informed of a lone wolf, one who had been lurking near the outskirts of the city for days, watching, waiting. The pack was on edge, their fears growing with each passing day. Some whispered that he was a scout for a rival faction. Others believed he was just a rogue with no allegiance. But Lyra had never been one to rush to conclusions. She would handle this with the same calm and fairness she had built her leadership on. Are you sure he's still out there? Lyra asked, turning to her closest advisor, Talon, a grizzled elder with a sharp gaze. He's been spotted more than once, Talon replied, his voice thick with concern. He's been moving around the periphery of the city, and each time he gets closer. He's dangerous, Lyra. We don't know what he wants. Lyra's eyes narrowed, but there was no trace of fear in her expression. She had lived through many challenges, and she would face this one head-on. If he poses a threat, we'll handle it. If he's simply lost, then we'll help him. No harm comes to anyone unless we understand who they're first. Talon didn't argue, but Lyra could see the doubt in his eyes. There were many in the pack who didn't share her belief in diplomacy, but she was determined to show them that her way, her peaceful approach, was the only way forward. The wolves set out at nightfall, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of the lone wolf. As they ventured deeper into the woods, a low growl broke the silence. The pack tensed, and Lyra signaled for them to stop. The lone wolf had been cornered. He was tall, lean, with piercing amber eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. His fur was a mixture of gray and brown, the marks of a wolf who had lived alone for too long. He stood still for a moment, studying the pack, before his gaze shifted toward Lyra. Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm and commanding. You're not a threat to us unless you choose to be. Come with us. No harm will come to you. The lone wolf's eyes flickered with surprise, but he didn't move. His gaze remained locked on Lyra as if assessing her. "And if I refuse, then we'll force you," Lyra replied, her tone unwavering. "But I'm giving you a choice. I don't believe in violence unless it's necessary." There was a pause, thick with tension. Then, slowly, the lone wolf stepped forward. The pack closed in, but Lyra held her hand out to stop them. She had made her decision, and she wouldn't back down. The journey back to the city was quiet, the lone wolf following reluctantly behind Lyra. As they entered the gates, the pack members eyed him warily, their distrust palpable. Lyra led the wolf to the center of the city, where a circle had already gathered to witness what was happening. The elders stood at the front, their faces a mixture of concern and judgment. Danzo, as always, was there, his arms crossed and his gaze hard. Lyra stood tall before the gathering, the lone wolf at her side. "This is Kai," she announced, her voice strong. "He is not an enemy, and he will not be treated as one." Danzo stepped forward, his voice booming. "You bring a rogue wolf into our midst without any regard for the consequences, Lyra. You invite a threat into the very heart of our pack. What if he's a spy or a saboteur? What if he comes to tear us apart?" Lyra met Danzo's gaze, unwavering. "Kai is not a threat. I've spoken to him, and he is no enemy of ours. He was simply wandering, lost, looking for a place to belong. I have decided to give him a chance to be part of this community. He is free to stay, or he may leave if he wishes. But the choice is his and his alone." Danzo's face darkened. "And what if this peace you speak of gets us killed? What if your ideals lead us to destruction? The pack needs strength, not this weakness." The words cut through Lyra's resolve, but she stood firm. "Strength is not found in domination, Danzo. It is found in the ability to choose compassion over fear. I am the Alpha, and I will lead with trust and unity." The tension in the air thickened, and Lyra could feel the eyes of the pack on her. Some were already murmuring, unsure of her decision. Her mind raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. Kai, who had been standing silently, finally spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. "I am not here to cause trouble. I was alone for a long time, but I'm willing to stay if you'll allow me." Lyra's heart lifted slightly, but she could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had made a choice, but it wasn't a popular one. She could already see the seeds of doubt planted among the pack members. She turned back to the elders. "This is my decision. Kai will stay with us, as part of the pack. I ask you to trust me in this." Talon's eyes softened, but Danzo was a different matter. He shook his head, muttering under his breath as he turned to walk away, his departure leaving a sour taste in Lyra's mouth. After the elders dispersed, Lyra found herself alone with Kai in the quiet of the courtyard. She could feel the weight of the pack's divided opinion, but there was a flicker of hope in her chest. She had done what she believed was right, and that had to be enough. "You're free to go, Kai," she said quietly. "But I'd be honored if you chose to stay. You've shown me more than anyone that peace doesn't have to come through violence." Kai's amber eyes met hers, filled with something she couldn't quite place. "Thank you, Alpha. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'll stay. For now." Lyra nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Then, welcome to the pack." But even as she said the words, she couldn't shake the feeling that this decision would come with consequences. The tension had only just begun. Danzo's opposition had only grown stronger, and Lyra knew that her leadership would be tested in ways she couldn't yet imagine. She only hoped that she was strong enough to keep the pack united, even as it began to fracture around her. The evening was quiet, the kind of stillness that felt like a breath held between two worlds. Lyra stepped out into the courtyard, the cool breeze ruffling her hair. It was a rare moment of peace in a city that had begun to feel like a powder keg, ready to explode. After the events of the day, the tension with the elders, the murmurs of distrust, Lyra needed a moment to think. She needed to clear her mind, to step away from the weight of leadership for just a little while. And there was someone she needed to speak with. Kai. He had been staying in the city, a member of the pack by her decree, but Lyra knew very little about him. His presence in the pack had stirred the pot, But beyond that, she only knew that he had come from a life of solitude. That, and the fact that his amber eyes always seemed to be watching, studying. She found him by the edge of the trees, his figure leaning against a tall oak. He looked as though he belonged there, as if he had always been a part of the forest itself. His fur was a mix of deep grays and browns, the colors blending into the shadows. His posture was relaxed, but there was something about him that still felt like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. Lyra hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach him. She didn't know why, but being near him made her feel different, more vulnerable. He had a quiet strength, a presence that seemed to fill the air around him, and for all her years of leadership, she wasn't sure how to navigate that. "Kai," she called out softly, her voice firm, though her heart pounded unexpectedly. "Could we talk?" He turned slowly, those amber eyes meeting hers with an unreadable expression. He said nothing at first, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his gaze. Finally, he straightened up and nodded, silently agreeing to her request. "All right," he said, his voice deeper than she had expected, rough like gravel. "Lead the way." They walked side by side through the dimly lit streets of a city. The air was thick with unspoken words, both of them aware of the tension that simmered between them. Lyra could feel it in the way he moved, cautious, eyes darting to the shadows as if expecting something to leap from them. His wariness was understandable. He had been a lone wolf for so long that trusting others must have been a struggle. But that didn't make the silence any easier. "So," Lyra said, breaking the quiet, her voice soft but firm. "Tell me about yourself. I only know the barest of details." Kai's gaze flickered to the ground, his brow furrowing slightly as if he hadn't been asked that question in years. "What's there to know?" he replied, his tone neutral. "I'm just a wolf who's lived alone. Not much to it, but there was more to him than that." Lyra could feel it. He was hiding something, a story buried deep beneath his cool exterior. The way he spoke, the deliberate choice of words, he was holding back. "You're not just a wolf who's lived alone," Lyra pressed, her voice gentle but Persis House. "Everyone has a story. I want to know yours." Kai was quiet for a moment, and Lyra thought for a second that he might refuse to answer. But then, as though he had made a decision, he exhaled sharply, like a sigh he had been holding for too long. "I left my pack a long time ago," he said finally, his voice low. "They weren't what I needed. Too focused on power, too focused on dominance. They didn't believe in anything beyond survival. So I left, and I've been on my own ever since." Lyra's gaze softened as she looked at him. There was something in his words that struck a chord with her, a truth she could relate to. Leadership wasn't just about power. It was about understanding. It was about trust. And from the way Kai spoke of his old pack, it sounded like he had never found that understanding. "That must have been hard," she said quietly, her voice laced with empathy. "To leave everything behind like that." He didn't respond right away, and Lyra didn't press him for more. There was a weight to his silence, one that spoke volumes without him having to say a word. As they continued walking, the tension between them seemed to shift, just slightly. There was still a wall between them, but it wasn't as thick as it had been. She could feel the faintest pull, an invisible thread tugging at her. She had thought, in the beginning, that she was simply offering him a place in the pack out of kindness, out of compassion. But now, as they walked side by side, she couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play. His presence was undeniable, and with each step, she found herself more aware of him, his scent, his warmth, the subtle power in his movements. There was a chemistry between them, unspoken but palpable, and Lyra could feel it in her chest, a tightening in her heart that she couldn't ignore. But she tried. She tried to ignore it. Kai wasn't supposed to be a distraction. He was a lone wolf, an outsider. She was the alpha. There were rules. There were boundaries. She couldn't let herself be pulled into whatever this was, not when there was so much at stake. As they reached the edge of a city, Lyra stopped, turning to face him. The streets were empty now, the soft glow of the torches casting shadows around them. She felt a flicker of hesitation before she spoke. "You're free to stay, Kai," she said, her voice steady, though the storm inside her was growing stronger. "I've decided that you can live here with us. No more wandering alone. But that decision is yours, not mine to make for you." Kai's amber eyes studied her for a long moment, as if searching for something in her face. Lyra held his gaze, her expression unwavering, but inside, her emotions were anything but calm. She had made the offer, but she didn't know what he would say, what he would decide. "I'll stay," he said finally, his voice quieter now, almost reluctant. "For now. But I'm not sure how long I'll remain." Lyra nodded, though something inside her tightened at his words. It wasn't the decision she had wanted, but it was a start. As they stood there, in the quiet of the night, Lyra felt a pull toward him, an undeniable connection, something deeper than just gratitude for his willingness to stay. But she fought it, just as she had fought the emotions rising inside her since they first met. This wasn't the time for such feelings. Not now, not when the future of the pack was at stake. She had to remain in control. She had to remain strong. But as she turned away and walked back toward the heart of the city, Lyra couldn't help but feel the tension lingering between them, the unspoken bond that was slowly beginning to form. And despite her best efforts to ignore it, she knew that this was only the beginning.
Chapter 4.
The grand hall was bathed in soft, flickering candlelight, the air filled with the hum of conversation and the scent of fine food and flowers. The gala was a rare occasion, an opportunity for the packs to come together in peace, to celebrate unity rather than war. Lyra had arranged it herself, wanting to give the pack a chance to relax, to let down their guard, and to remind them that despite the growing tensions, they were still a family. She stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down over the gathering below. The walls were lined with intricate tapestries, and the floor was covered in a rich, velvet carpet that seemed to glow under the soft lights. It was the epitome of elegance, yet Lyra couldn't shake the unease in her chest. The weight of the night, the growing expectations, and her own internal conflict felt heavy. "Is everything to your liking, Alpha?" Talon's voice broke through her thoughts. He stood beside her, his presence as solid and steady as ever. "Yes, everything is perfect," she replied, though her thoughts were elsewhere. She wasn't sure if it was the evening's grandeur or the quiet ache she'd been feeling for days, but something had shifted inside her. The sense of duty she'd carried for so long felt suffocating, like she was drowning beneath the responsibilities of leadership, and the increasing proximity to Kai, the lone wolf, only made it worse. The door to the hall opened, and Lyra's heart skipped a beat when she saw him. Kai! He had been invited as her +1, though neither of them had discussed it. Lyra hadn't really thought through the implications of having him at her side, but now, as he entered the room in a fitted black tunic, his eyes scanning the crowd, she knew this decision was going to change everything. His eyes found hers almost immediately, and for a moment, the buzz of the gala seemed to fade away. He gave her a slight nod, acknowledging her with a quiet respect that made her heart flutter. Lyra's pulse quickened, and she took a slow breath, trying to calm herself. This was just a night among the pack. This was about unity, peace, and leadership. She couldn't let herself be distracted. But as Kai made his way toward her, Lyra could feel the magnetic pull between them grow stronger with each step. The attraction, the desire, it was undeniable. "Shall we?" Lyra asked, trying to keep her composure. She offered him her arm, her gaze steady, though the storm in her chest was far from calm. Kai took her arm, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the faces around her, elders, pack leaders, and allies who looked on with curiosity, some with skepticism. She had to remain the alpha. She couldn't let anything, especially her growing feelings for Kai, interfere with her role. As they moved deeper into the crowd, Lyra's eyes scanned the room, noting the eyes that followed them. The atmosphere was filled with more than just the buzz of conversation. There was a subtle undercurrent of tension, a reminder of how fragile the peace really was. Lyra and Kai stood for a moment, watching the guests mingle around the grand hall. The air was thick with laughter and conversation, but a quiet stillness lingered between them, charged with unspoken tension. Kai's amber eyes met hers, his gaze unwavering. Lyra finally broke the silence, her voice gentle but firm. Go mingle. I need to speak to people from the other packs. Kai raised an eyebrow, a mischievous smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Don't miss me too much, he teased. Lyra smirked, shaking her head. I'm sure I'll survive. Kai stepped back, moving into the crowd. His presence still a magnetic pull in the room, but Lyra turned to greet the various members of the other packs. She exchanged pleasantries with alpha leaders, nodded in agreement during strategic conversations, and offered warm smiles to those she'd known for years. She had to stay focused, to remember her duty, but her thoughts often drifted back to Kai, who now appeared far across the room. It wasn't until Lyra found herself momentarily alone, standing by a column, that she allowed herself a moment of respite. Her thoughts were clear again, until Alpha Raylon approached her, his presence commanding. You know, Lyra, Raylon said smoothly, stepping closer, his voice dripping with intent. I've always admired your ability to host such impressive gatherings. You really do have a talent for bringing the packs together. Lyra offered a polite smile but didn't quite meet his gaze, her attention drifting toward Kai. He was now surrounded by two women, clearly flirting with him, their laughter bright and loud. His calm, steady presence made it impossible for her to ignore the pull between them. Lyra quickly turned away, not wanting to get distracted or jealous. Yes, unity is important, she replied absently, not fully engaging with Raylon. Her gaze flitted back to Kai, who had briefly glanced at her again. She swallowed, trying to push the feelings down. She couldn't afford to be distracted. Raylon continued speaking, but Lyra's mind was elsewhere. Finally, after a moment of strained silence, she forced herself to focus back on Raylon. You've had a long day, Raylon, she said coolly, her voice regaining its authority. Perhaps you should find someone else to speak to? Raylon raised an eyebrow, his smile never faltering. As you wish, Alpha. With a bow, he turned away, but not without casting one last lingering look at her and Kai. Lyra exhaled sharply, relief washing over her as Raylon retreated. She quickly turned her attention back to Kai, but the attraction between them was growing stronger, and the weight of the evening was becoming harder to ignore. As she moved through the crowd, trying to regain her composure, her heel caught on the edge of a rug. She stumbled, unable to catch herself, but before she could fall, a strong hand gripped her waist, steadying her. She looked up, startled to find Kai inches from her, his hand firmly at her waist, his face inches from hers. The room around them seemed to disappear, and for that brief moment, it was just the two of them in the middle of the bustling gala. His amber eyes held hers, his touch warm and steady. You should be more careful, Kai said, his voice low and warm, the hint of a smile playing at the corner of his lips. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling her heart race. She quickly pulled away, straightening herself. I'm fine, she said, though her voice wavered slightly. She forced a smile, but inside, her heart was pounding. The moment passed, but the connection lingered, a silent promise between them. The gala continued around them, but the weight of the night and the growing pull toward Kai was becoming harder to ignore. The moment passed, but the connection remained. They continued to mingle, though Lyra could feel his presence constant, but Lyra tried to ignore it. Tried to ignore how drawn to him she was, how impossible it was to shake the feeling that something was there. As the night wore on, she couldn't help but notice the glances. The way other wolves in the room would look at them, and the way Kai would subtly avoid them, his eyes always returning to her. She noticed Kelly, a member of her own pack, catching Kai's eye and flashing him a flirtatious smile. But Kai didn't respond. His gaze stayed on Lyra unwavering. Lyra's heart beat a little faster at the realization. It wasn't just her who was feeling this pull. Kai was feeling it too, but she couldn't let it be. She couldn't afford to let her emotions get in the way of her duty. Love, desire, they were luxuries she couldn't afford, not when the future of the pack was on her shoulders and shaky. The night air was cool as Lyra stepped into the private chambers she used for reflection. The gala had ended hours ago, but she couldn't shake the lingering tension in the air, the quiet hum of emotions that had built up throughout the night. She had spent the evening surrounded by the pack, yet all she could think about was him, Kai. The connection between them had only grown stronger, undeniable. Every glance, every moment they shared, had pulled her closer to something she wasn't sure she could control. It was as if an invisible thread had been wound around them, tightening with each passing day. To think of it, it was just weeks ago he arrived, but now she couldn't stop thinking about him. Such fickle the heart, as she thought to herself. But then again, the consequences of that connection weighed heavily on her. She wasn't blind to the implications. A relationship, an attraction like this, would destabilize everything she had worked for. The pack trusted her to lead them with wisdom and strength, but could they trust her if they knew the truth about her growing feelings for the lone wolf? Lyra paced the room, running her fingers through her hair as she wrestled with the dilemma. This was not just about her and love, but also about the pack. About the future of everything she had spent years building. Could she afford to let these feelings shape her decisions? Her thoughts drifted back to Kai. He had been so steadfast, so quiet in his devotion to her, never pressuring her, but always there by her side, as if he were waiting for something for her. But she was the alpha. She couldn't let herself be swayed by personal desires. Every moment spent with Kai, every smile exchanged, was a moment that drew her further from her responsibilities. The sound of soft footsteps at the door interrupted her thoughts. Lyra turned quickly to find Lucas standing in the doorway, his expression as calm and unreadable as ever. "Alpha," he began, his voice low, respectful. "You've been distant after the gala. I thought perhaps you could use some company." Lyra nodded, her thoughts clouded, though her voice remained steady. "I'm fine, Lucas. Just thinking." Lucas stepped into the room, closing the door behind him as he looked at her, his gaze softening. "I can see you are troubled. I know these are difficult times. You've been under a great deal of pressure, but you need not carry it alone." "I know," Lyra said softly, her eyes lowering as she rubbed her head, trying to push away the frustration. "But this, what I feel, I don't know if I can ignore it anymore." Lucas' gaze didn't waver. "You don't have to explain yourself, Lyra. I've seen what's between you and him, the connection. It's clear to anyone who's paying $1,000. Lyra's heart skipped a beat at his words, her mind racing. "I can't lead the pack if I let myself be distracted," she said, the words falling out before she could stop them. "I can't let this, whatever this is, get in the way of my duty." Lucas regarded her thoughtfully, his expression unreadable. "You are stronger than you think. But the question is, what will you choose? You've always led with your heart, but your heart is conflicted now. Can you suppress this for the sake of the pack? Or will it consume you?" Lyra swallowed hard. His words struck deeper than she cared to admit. She had always trusted her instincts, her heart. But this was different. The weight of leadership was never so heavy, and the emotional strain was becoming harder to carry. "I don't know," Lyra whispered, feeling more vulnerable than she had in a long time. "I don't know if I can keep pushing these feelings down." Lucas stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Then you must decide. Do you allow these feelings to shape your path, or do you put them aside for the greater good of the pack? Either way, you must make a choice." The words hit her like a blow. The choice seemed simple in theory, but the reality was anything but. She couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward Kai, but could she truly lead the pack with that same desire simmering just below the surface? The silence between them stretched, thick with the weight of her indecision. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of all she had worked for, of the pack that relied on her leadership. She had always been the steady hand, the unyielding force that guided them through difficult times. But now, with Kai's presence so close, so constant, she didn't know if she could maintain that control. "Maybe I can't ignore it," Lyra said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "But I can't let it control me either." Lucas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That is the burden of leadership, Lyra. To choose the hard path, even when your heart wishes to lead you in another direction. equals 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 equals. Lyra took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had made her decision, but the emotional turmoil still twisted in her chest. She couldn't allow her personal desires to undermine her role as alpha. Her duty had always come first, and it always would, but the pull between her and Kai was growing stronger, and she knew it wasn't something she could just push away. "I'll stay distant," she said, her voice firm, though her heart ached with the weight of the decision. "For now, for the pack, I'll keep my feelings in check." Lucas gave her a small, knowing smile. "And that is why you're the alpha. You carry the weight of your people's needs above your own desires. But don't forget, Lyra, your heart is just as much a part of you as your leadership." Lyra nodded, though a part of her felt like she was suffocating under the strain of her own resolve. She would keep her distance from Kai, even though her heart screamed for her to close the gap between them. She would remain the leader her pack needed, even if it meant denying herself the one thing that could make her whole. Lucas was one of the few people she could trust, even with her life. Time and time again, he has proved his loyalty to her. That's why she could freely and easily talk about her feelings for Kai with him, knowing what was at stake if the wrong ears heard it.
Chapter 5.
Lyra's footsteps were hurried but silent as she approached Kai's door. She barely had time to gather herself, her heart racing with each step. She had promised herself she wouldn't come, but now, as the weight of her leadership and the growing distance from him pressed on her, she couldn't stay away. When she reached the door, she hesitated, taking a deep breath before knocking. She could already feel the anticipation building inside her, a mix of excitement and fear. She had no idea how long they could keep this up, this forbidden connection. But she needed it, needed him. Kai didn't expect her tonight, and it was obvious when he opened the door. His surprise was quickly replaced by amusement as he took in her covered form. "What's this? You're all hidden under that cloak like some kind of mysterious stranger," he teased, his voice low and warm. Lyra stepped inside, pulling her hood down just enough to meet his gaze, her expression still guarded but soft. "You know why," she said, her voice low, almost apologetic. "I can't risk anyone seeing me. Still hiding." Kai smirked, closing the door behind her. He moved closer, his eyes studying her every movement. "I thought you'd be done with that by now." Lyra let out a short, quiet laugh, and before she could stop herself, she reached for him, pulling him into an embrace. The tension between them was undeniable, their bodies aligning in perfect sync, as though they had always been meant to be this close. Kai's arms wrapped around her, and for a moment, there was only silence, an unspoken understanding between them. Then he leaned back slightly, brushing his lips against her ear. "Miss me that much?" he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. "I hate it when you're right," Lyra replied, her voice soft but laced with longing. He grinned, a playful glint in his eyes. "I didn't hear you complaining at the gala. You couldn't keep your eyes off me, could you?" Lyra rolled her eyes, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "And you couldn't keep your eyes off me either. Don't act like you weren't watching." He chuckled and stepped back, pulling her with him. "Maybe," he said, his voice dropping low. "But we both know it was hard not to." The teasing stopped as he reached for her once again, this time his kiss deep and desperate, an explosion of desire that neither of them could hold back. Lyra felt the world around her dissolve as she kissed him, as if nothing else mattered except the overwhelming need to be near him. They broke apart reluctantly, their breaths mingling in the quiet space between them. Kai's hand slid down her back, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her. "You should leave," he said suddenly, his voice serious, "before they start wondering where you are." Lyra's chest tightened. "I don't want to go," she whispered, her lips brushing against his. "Just a little longer. Please." Without her finishing what she was saying, he pulled her in, crushing his lips to hers with an intensity that stole her breath away. His hands moved quickly, tugging at her clothes, his touch urgent as he lifted her off the ground, pressing her against him. She wrapped her legs around him instinctively, the heat between them building in an instant. His kiss was desperate, hungry, as though he couldn't get enough of her. Her hands roamed over his chest, feeling the hard lines of his muscles, the heat radiating off his skin. She could feel his heart pounding in sync with hers, and for a moment, the world outside of them didn't exist. The only thing that mattered was the electricity crackling between them, the magnetic pull that neither could resist. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes wild with desire. "You're everything, Lyra," he growled, his voice rough. Without waiting for a response, his lips were on hers again, more forceful now, more demanding. She responded eagerly, matching his urgency as their kiss deepened. Her fingers tangled in his hair, tugging him closer, needing more, wanting more. Their bodies moved together, the rhythm building as they gave in to the heat consuming them both. His hands roamed down her body, caressing every inch of her with a mix of reverence and hunger. Lyra's pulse raced, her chest heaving with every breath, every touch. There was no turning back now, no pretending this wasn't happening. His mouth trailed down her neck, kissing, nipping, leaving a trail of fire wherever he touched. Her body arched toward him, craving the connection, the feeling of him, strong, intense, yet tender in his own way. She whispered his name, the sound of it slipping from her lips like a prayer. And when he finally pulled away, both of them breathless, their faces inches apart, the weight of their closeness pressed down on them. She knew, without a doubt, that nothing would be the same after this. The desire between them had crossed a line, one neither could uncross. He cupped her face, his eyes dark with intensity. "You know how this ends. You stay longer and they'll notice. You're not just the alpha, they'll feel your absence." Lyra let out a frustrated sigh, her hands clutching the fabric of his shirt. "But I can't keep doing this, Kai. I don't want to run away from what we have. I don't want to hide anymore." "I know," Kai whispered back, his voice low and comforting. He paused, his thumb tracing her jawline. "But if you stay, it might be the last time we have a chance to be like this. You're playing a dangerous game." Her breath hitched, a conflict building inside her. "I know," she murmured, her eyes searching his. "But what if it's worth it? What if?" Kai pressed a finger to her lips, silencing her. "What if it's not? I won't let you lose everything for me, Lyra. Not this way." Her heart clenched at his words, the weight of the pack's expectations crashing down on her once again. But as she pulled him back into a kiss, the world around her disappeared. The risk, the consequences, everything melted away. But eventually, they broke apart again, both of them breathless. "I'll see you soon," Lyra whispered, her voice shaking as she pulled away from him, reluctant to leave, but knowing she had no choice. "I'll be here," he replied, his voice firm, though his eyes held the same pain she felt. "Whenever you're ready." As she stepped away from him, she felt the tug of their connection pulling at her heart, stronger than ever before. The reality of their secret relationship weighed heavily on her, but in that moment, all she could feel was the longing. It would have to be enough for now. But she knew, deep down, that it wasn't enough. Not anymore. With a final glance, she disappeared into the night, her mind racing, knowing the path she was on would change everything. Lyra stood by the window in her chambers, looking out over the darkened city as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. Her body was still, but her mind was racing. The attack on their trade route had come without warning, and reports had reached her just moments ago. She'd kept her composure, but every instinct within her was on edge. A knock sounded at the door, and without waiting for a response, Lucas entered. His expression was serious, the urgency in his step making Lyra's heart race even more. "It's true," he said without preamble, his voice tight. "The attack was real. No casualties, but the message is clear. They're testing us." Lyra nodded, her gaze still on the distant horizon. "Testing us, or challenging us," she muttered, a thought she hadn't wanted to voice but felt in her gut. "Who do you think is behind it?" Lucas hesitated before responding. Could be anyone. But it's unlikely the neighboring packs would move this soon. It's too early to be sure. Her mind raced with possibilities, but her body remained calm, the alpha in her taking control. She'd learned to stay composed in moments like this, to think first before reacting. It was what her father had taught her, though his lessons had been about strength through war. Lyra had promised herself she would take a different path, a path of peace. "I won't react out of fear or anger," she said firmly, her voice steady. "We don't know who did this yet. We need to think this through before we act." "Others aren't thinking that way," Lucas replied, a note of frustration in his voice. "Danzo and some of the elders believe it's the neighboring packs testing our resolve. They want war. You know that." Lyra turned to him, her eyes hardening slightly, but she kept her voice calm. "I will not lead with bloodshed. That's not the path I'm choosing." Lucas gave her a sharp look. "And what if it's not your choice? What if the pack forces your hand?" Lyra felt the pressure mounting, but she refused to let it show. "They will follow me, Lucas. They have to." Lucas looked at her for a moment, and then something in his gaze softened. "You're one of the strongest wolves in this pack, Lyra. We all know that. But your father's strength wasn't in the battles he fought. It was in the legacy he left. But even that couldn't save him from the war. You said you wouldn't lead like he did. Is peace worth everything?" Her chest tightened at the mention of her father. She had never wanted to follow in his footsteps. She had seen the destruction he caused, the lives lost. She would not let her pack fall into that same fate. "I will lead differently," she replied, her voice unwavering, though inside, doubt threatened to creep in. "But I won't let the pressure break me." Lucas watched her silently for a moment before speaking again, his tone softer. "You're doing what you believe is best for them. But you have to ask yourself, what will they do when the world doesn't bend to your will?" She stepped away from the window, feeling the weight of her position more than ever. Her father's death, the endless battles, those were not the future she wanted. She could feel the tension in the air, a quiet unease growing among the pack. Their doubts were turning into whispers, and one of the biggest whispers was about the lone wolf. "Lucas, we have to stop the rumors," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm doing what I think is right. But my relationship with Kai, it's complicating things." Lucas' eyes flickered for a moment. "I know. The pack's starting to question your leadership because of him. Some think he's a threat, and you're allowing him too close." Lyra's heart tightened, but she pushed it down. She couldn't let this destroy everything. "He's not a threat, Lucas. He's not like the others. I see that." "You're too close to him," Lucas said, his voice urgent. "This can't end well. They'll see it as a weakness. You have to think of the pack." Lyra's fingers tightened around the edge of the table, her body rigid as she processed Lucas' words. "I am thinking of the pack," she snapped, her voice sharp but quickly softening. "I am. But it's becoming too much. The rumors, the secrecy. How long can I keep pretending none of this is affecting us?" Lucas' gaze remained steady, his voice serious, laced with urgency. "Then you need to decide what's truly at stake here, Lyra. Your duty to the pack or your heart." Lyra's chest tightened at his words, and for a moment, all she could hear was the pounding of her own pulse. The weight of her responsibility crushed her shoulders, but there was also the pull of what she felt for Kai, something she couldn't ignore, despite knowing the consequences. Her father's legacy of battle and bloodshed still echoed in her thoughts, and she had sworn never to follow that path. Yet, here she was, torn between the two. The sudden thought of the attack on the trade route snapped her back to reality. Her eyes flicked to Lucas. This attack, Lucas. What if it's the start of something bigger? What if the pack can't take this kind of strain anymore? He paused, then spoke carefully. "The elders are already pushing for war, Lyra. Danzo's rhetoric is spreading. He says we can't let this attack slide. The neighboring packs are a threat. We can't show weakness." Lyra's lips pressed into a tight line. The tension was mounting, the whispers growing louder by the day. "And if we go to war, what will we have left?" She shook her head, the frustration spilling over. "I refuse to let this be a reason for more bloodshed." Lucas watched her, his face filled with concern. But if you let the pack see your indecision, it won't just be war. They'll start questioning everything. They already are. You're not the leader they expect. And the rumors about you and the lone wolf aren't helping. Lyra's gaze turned to the window, her mind racing. She felt like she was standing at a precipice, torn between the peace she believed in and the pressure to conform to her father's legacy. The tension was unbearable, the walls closing in. The silence between them felt heavy. Lyra could sense the growing divide in the pack, could feel the eyes of those around her judging, watching her every move. The rumors about her relationship with Kai were feeding into the fears of some, while others saw it as a betrayal of everything her father had stood for. I'm trying to do what's best for the pack, but I don't know how much longer I can hold them together like this, she whispered, her voice strained. Lucas stepped closer, lowering his voice. You need to make a decision, Lyra, before it's too late. She swallowed hard, the weight of the situation bearing down on her. She was losing control, not just of her pack, but of the path she had sworn to follow. Something had to give, and she wasn't sure if she could stop it from breaking. Just don't make me choose between my pack and him, she muttered under her breath. I can't lose both. As she turned back to the table, the realization hit her hard. There was no clear answer, no easy way out. The only thing she knew for certain was that something had to break, soon, and she wasn't sure if she could control which part of her life it would be.
Chapter 6.
Lyra stood in the middle of the road, her heart pounding as she watched him approach from the distance. She hadn't seen him in days, the silence between them only amplifying the turmoil inside her. She had told herself she couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep sneaking around, torn between her love for him and her duties. But here she was, unable to turn away. Kai halted a few paces away, his eyes searching hers. You've been avoiding me, he said, his voice steady but with a hint of hurt. Lyra hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. She had fought to stay away, but it was clear now that she couldn't. She had tried, but every moment without him felt like an eternity. I had to, she finally said, her voice quiet. I can't keep risking everything. He stepped closer, his expression softening. I miss you. I can't stay away any longer, Lyra. I can't. She looked at him, conflicted but unable to deny the pull between them. I don't know what I'm doing with you, she whispered. I don't know why I'm falling for you so easily. You've shown me a love I didn't think I deserved. But I can't let this ruin everything. Kai reached out, gently taking her hand. I've got nothing to hide from you, Lyra. You see me, really see me, in ways no one else ever has. I'm not like the others. You understand me, and I understand you. I can't just walk away from that. She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around his. But what if we can't keep this hidden forever? What happens then? What happens when the pack turns on us? He stepped closer, his voice low. Then we'll face it together. I'm not going anywhere. For a moment, she closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. Could she truly trust him? Was this bond between them strong enough to survive the consequences of their secret love? The doubt swirled inside her, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let him go. I can't stay away either, she finally said, her voice shaking. But I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending this isn't happening. Kai pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. Then let's not pretend anymore, he whispered. Later, they met at his place. Lyra stood at the edge of the doorway, still cloaked, her face hidden from view. Her heart raced as she stepped inside, unsure of what to expect. She knew the risk, being seen, being followed, but her desire for him outweighed the fear. I thought you might change your mind, Kai said, his voice filled with warmth. He moved toward her, taking her hand gently in his, leading her deeper into the room. Can we really keep doing this? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He kissed her softly, his lips lingering on hers, reassuring her. We'll keep doing this until we can't anymore. They pulled away from the kiss, breathless, and for a moment, everything else faded. The weight of the pack's expectations, the constant pressure of their disapproval, didn't seem to matter. All that mattered was this moment between them. Kai cupped her face, his thumb brushing over her cheek. I want a future with you, Lyra. A future where we're free to be who we are without hiding. Her heart fluttered at his words, but a pang of guilt shot through her. She knew the risks, knew the dangers of their love, but in that moment, she couldn't bring herself to care. She stepped closer to him, pressing her body against his. The intimacy between them was undeniable, raw and fierce. I want that too, she whispered. But I don't know how we can have it. Not with everything else at stake. Kai held her tighter, his lips brushing against her ear. We'll find a way together. They shared a kiss then, deeper and more intense than before. It was as though the world outside of them ceased to exist. There was no pack, no judgments, just the two of them, caught in the bond they couldn't deny. But as the kiss broke, the reality of their situation crashed down on them. The weight of their secret, the scrutiny they would face, the pack that was slowly turning against them, it was all too much. Lyra pulled away, her breath shallow. We can't keep doing this, she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of longing and regret. It's not just us anymore. It's everything we've built. Kai's eyes darkened, and he stepped back, running a hand through his hair. I know, but what are we supposed to do? Live without this? Without each other? Lyra looked at him, her heart torn in two. I don't know, but I know I can't keep pretending. Kai reached for her again, pulling her into his arms. We'll figure it out. Together. For a moment, everything felt right. But deep down, Lyra knew their love could never remain a secret for long. The tension between them and the world outside was growing, and she wasn't sure how much longer they could keep hiding. Something had to change. You're weak, Lyra. Danzo's voice cut through the silence, sharp and taunting. You think peace will save us? You think this pack will follow you when you can't even control your own emotions? Lyra's fists clenched, but she kept her gaze steady. I don't need you to tell me how to lead, Danzo. Danzo took a step closer, his face inches from hers. Then what is this, Lyra? This nonsense with that lone wolf. He's a threat, and you've let him poison you. You're too soft. The pack can't trust you. The words stung, but Lyra held her ground. I'm not like you, Danzo. I won't rule with fear. Fear keeps us alive, Danzo sneered, his breath hot against her face. But you, he scoffed, you're lost. His words hit too hard. Her control faltered. She wasn't the type to let anger get the best of her. She never lost control. But at that moment, something inside her snapped. Before she could stop herself, her claws extended, slashing across Danzo's face with a speed and force that left deep gouges in his skin. The blood welled up immediately, dripping down his cheek as he staggered back. Danzo smiled, a dark glint in his eyes. There it is, he murmured, wiping the blood from his face. That's the real you, Lyra. It's just a matter of time before you give in to it. You can't run from who you are. Lyra stood frozen, her claws retracting as she stared at him, a cold sweat breaking out across her skin. She had never lost control like this. It was unthinkable, reckless. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. She couldn't stay here, couldn't face the aftermath of what she'd just done. Without another word, she turned and ran. Lyra didn't stop until she reached the edge of the woods, where she collapsed against a tree, her body shaking. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on her. She had let herself be triggered, let Danzo's words push her over the edge. A soft growl from the shadows interrupted her thoughts. Lyra's head snapped up, her heart racing as she instinctively reached for her claws. But it wasn't an enemy. It was him. Kai. He stepped into the clearing, his eyes soft with concern. Lyra! His voice was low, calm as he approached her, taking in her disheveled state. He knelt beside her, cupping her face gently in his hands. You're shaking. Lyra closed her eyes, the fight leaving her body as she leaned into him. I lost control, she whispered. I've never done that before. I don't know what's happening to me. Kai didn't say anything at first, just held her there, grounding her. You're under too much pressure, he murmured, his voice steady. You can't keep carrying the weight of everything, not like this. You don't have to fight alone. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. And in that moment, everything seemed so simple. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered, her voice cracking. "The pack, Danzo, the rumors about us. It's all too much." Kai's eyes softened. "Then don't do it alone. You don't have to. Let me help you." Lyra shook her head, pulling away slightly. "It's not just about us. It's about everything I've worked for. I can't lose the pack. I can't." A rustling sound broke the moment, and Lyra's head snapped up. Someone was watching them. Without warning, Lyra stood up, her body tense. She didn't need to say anything. Kai could sense it too. They weren't alone. Hours later, Lyra found herself back in the council hall, standing before the elders. Danzo's words echoed in her mind as they waited for her to speak. "You've been avoiding the truth, Lyra." Talon spoke first, his voice gruff but firm. "This isn't just about leadership anymore. It's about what's happening with you and the lone wolf. The pack is divided. You've let this relationship distract you from your duties. You need to choose." The weight of their words hit harder than any blow. The entire room was silent as all eyes turned to her. She could feel the pressure mounting, the expectations suffocating her. "Choose the pack, Lyra," Talon continued, his voice rising slightly. "Or choose him. But you can't have both." Lyra felt her stomach twist, the crushing reality of their ultimatum settling over her like a storm. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, feel her chest tighten as she weighed her choices. And then, the room fell deathly silent, waiting for her decision.
Chapter 7.
Lyra stood in front of the council, the weight of the room pressing down on her. Danzo, standing tall at the head, had already positioned himself as the voice of authority. His cold eyes fixed on her as he held up the mark, a glaring symbol of her connection to the lone wolf. "You see this?" Danzo's voice was cutting, amplified by the silence that followed his words. "This mark proves everything we've been warning her about. She's allowed her personal feelings to overshadow her duties, attacking one of her own. Losing control like this is not the leader we need." The elders murmured among themselves, the tension in the room thickening. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, as their eyes narrowed in on her, the judgment mounting. She had been so careful, trying to walk the fine line between leadership and love, but here it was laid bare, and the consequences were now undeniable. "You've lost control, Lyra," one elder said, his voice laced with disappointment. "You've let your emotions jeopardize the pack. How can we trust you to lead when you're blinded by this relationship?" Lyra's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. She couldn't afford to say anything that would show weakness. Not now. Danzo stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "You've already proven to us that you're incapable of balancing your duties. This mark, your behavior, everything, your relationship with this outsider has compromised you. The pack cannot afford to have a leader who's so easily swayed." Lyra clenched her fists at her sides. She had fought so hard to protect the pack, to hold on to peace, but now, with the elders turning on her and Danzo's manipulations in full swing, she realized the inevitable truth. "Enough!" She finally spoke, her voice strong despite the turmoil inside her. "I haven't failed you. I've given everything to this pack, peace, stability. But if you think I'll abandon love for power, then maybe I'm not the leader you need." Danzo smiled darkly. "That's the choice, Lyra. You either keep your position, or you keep him. But you can't have both." The room fell silent as Lyra looked at each of the elders, their faces hard, their eyes unyielding. She felt the pressure bearing down on her like a crushing weight. They weren't giving her a chance to think. They were forcing her hand. "You have to make a decision, Lyra," one elder said, his voice final. She took a deep breath, the weight of everything hanging in the balance. The pack's future, her heart, her responsibilities, all of it tied to this moment. Lyra turned to face the elders, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "Then I choose love." The words felt like a release, like something she had been holding inside for so long. The room went cold with silence, but Lyra didn't back down. She had made her choice. "I step down," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I choose him over this. I choose my happiness." The elders stared at her in disbelief, the shock of her decision reverberating through the chamber. Danzo's expression shifted, a mixture of fury and satisfaction playing across his face. Lyra didn't wait for their response. She turned, her decision made, her heart pounding in her chest. She had chosen love, and as she walked out of the council room, she could feel the weight of her choice settling over her. There was no turning back now. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt free. Lyra dipped her hands into the cool, smooth clay, feeling the familiar weight as she began to shape it. It had been so long since she had done this. The rhythmic turning of the pottery brought a sense of peace she hadn't realized she was missing. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the motions ground her. This was simplicity. This was freedom. No packs, no responsibilities, just the moment and the clay. Kai leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her. A small smirk tugged at his lips. "You know, you're the worst potter I've ever seen." Lyra paused, glancing up at him with a mischievous smile. "You didn't even know I could make pottery," she teased, focusing back on the wheel. "And I've never been good at it, but I've missed doing it." "Missed it?" Kai stepped closer, crouching down beside her. "You mean you remembered it? Because the last time you tried, you ended up with a lump of clay that couldn't even be called a pot." Lyra laughed, shaking her head as she tried to focus on shaping the clay. "You're not wrong. But this time I think it's going better." Kai chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch tender. "Sure, if you call that a pot," he teased again, making her laugh harder. She nudged him playfully, her fingers still moving along the spinning clay. "You know, sometimes you have to choose yourself, your heart, and your love. I've spent so much of my life choosing what was expected of me. Now I'm choosing to just be." Kai looked at her, the teasing glint in his eyes softening. "And what a beautiful choice it is," he said, his voice low. "I never thought I'd see the day you'd let go of all that responsibility." Lyra paused for a moment, gazing at the pot she was trying to form. She didn't quite know what it would become yet, but she felt something in her shift, a weight lifting. "I didn't realize how much I needed this. How much I needed peace in you." Kai smiled, leaning in and kissing her cheek. "You deserve this, Lyra. You deserve all of it." The kiss lingered on her skin as she turned to face him, her eyes soft. "I'm still getting used to this," she admitted. "Living without the weight of the pack, without the responsibility of being the alpha. I still feel uncertain. But with you it's different." Kai cupped her face, his thumb brushing over her cheek. "I know you're used to carrying the world on your shoulders, but right now, just be here with me. We don't have to worry about anything else." She leaned into his touch, feeling the warmth of his words wash over her. There was nothing like this. No weight, no expectations. Just love. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me a way to just live." They shared a kiss, this one soft and slow, a promise of everything they had built and everything they would have. Later that evening, Lyra sat at the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Kai sat beside her, and for the first time, they were both at ease. She hadn't realized how much the constant pressure of leadership had drained her. This new life, however simple, was hers, and for the first time, she wasn't alone in it. As Kai leaned back, resting his head on the wall, he glanced over at her. "What are you thinking?" Lyra smiled, the weight of her decision settling in her chest. "That I'm happy. That for the first time in a long time I can breathe." She turned to look at him, her eyes filled with affection. "And that I've made the right choice." He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Then let's hold on to it. No more looking back. This is our time now." Lyra squeezed his hand, finally feeling the peace she had longed for. They had created a new life together, one built on love, trust, and the freedom to choose each other every day. But as the night deepened, a distant howl echoed through the woods, a reminder that peace, as fragile as it felt, wasn't guaranteed. Lyra knew that, Even in this new life, they were still in a world that could change in an instant. But for now, she was content. She had chosen love, and in that moment, that was enough.
Chapter 8.
Lyra sat at the small wooden table in their cottage, the quiet of the room a stark contrast to the growing chaos she could feel from the outside. Kai stood by the window, his eyes scanning the horizon, his stance tense. The piece they had carved out together felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. "Something's wrong," Lyra said softly, her voice filled with uncertainty. Her fingers drummed nervously against the table, the unease gnawing at her. "I feel it. Something's happening with the pack." Kai turned to face her, his expression serious. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. Lucas, his face grim, his posture tense. "I've been to the pack. Danzo's been making moves," Lucas said, his voice tight. "He's attacked the neighboring pack. Under the guise of retribution for the carriage attack." Lyra's heart sank, but it wasn't them who attacked. "We never knew who it was for sure." Lucas nodded, frustration in his eyes. "Exactly. But Danzo doesn't care. He's blaming the neighboring pack, calling it revenge. His thirst for power is getting out of hand." Kai stepped forward, his voice low. "And the truth doesn't matter to him?" Lucas shook his head. "No. He doesn't see the difference between rogue wolves scavenging for food and actual enemies. It's all about territory, power, control." Lyra stood up suddenly, the weight of the decision she had made crashing down on her. She turned away, pacing, feeling the walls of the room close in around her. "I thought I was doing the right thing," stepping down. "I thought I could leave the violence behind. But now—" "You can't change the past, Lyra," Lucas said gently, understanding her internal battle. "But you have to understand, you left because of what you saw in Danzo. This is who he is. This is what he's always been." She clenched her fists, feeling the sting of guilt settle into her chest. "I left to live a peaceful life. I left him in charge to protect the pack, but now I've abandoned them to this." "It's not on you anymore," Kai said firmly, stepping to her side. "You made your choice for a reason. If you were still in charge, you'd be fighting this battle, but at what cost to you? To us." Lyra looked out the window, her eyes distant. "But the pack, they're suffering. Danzo's only going to make things worse. What if this is the beginning of something much worse?" Lucas stepped forward, his gaze serious. "It is. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. You should know that. He's out for blood, and he'll stop at nothing to expand his control." Lyra felt torn, caught between the life she had chosen with Kai and the pack she had left behind. The guilt of walking away was like a weight on her chest, but there was also a growing realization deep inside. She had made the right choice. She wasn't the leader she used to be. That person was gone. "The pack needs a leader," she said quietly. "And I'm not that leader anymore." "But they need you," Lucas insisted. "They need someone who's strong enough to stand against him." Lyra met his gaze, her resolve growing stronger. "They had me. But now I'm just someone who wants to protect the love I have here. I can't go back to that life. I'm not that person anymore." Lucas sighed, his eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and frustration. "But you know what's happening to them, Lyra. You know the consequences of your choice. You're going to have to live with it." Lyra nodded, her chest tight, but she knew deep down that she had made the right decision. She could feel the pull of her new life with Kai, and while it came with its own sacrifices, she couldn't go back to the person she had been. The alpha who had led through fear and war was gone. "I know," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But I'm not the alpha they need, and I can't make that choice again. Not for them. Not for anyone." Lucas turned to leave, his footsteps heavy as he paused at the door. "You'll have to live with what happens next, Lyra. It's not over yet." Lyra watched him leave, the weight of his words sinking in. As the door closed behind him, she turned to Kai, her heart heavy with the uncertainty of what the future held. She had made her choice. But was it the right one? "I'll never stop loving you," she whispered to him, her voice soft but filled with the strength of her resolve. Kai pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "And I'll never stop choosing you." But deep down, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was far from over. Danzo's rule was just beginning, and the consequences of her decision had only just begun to unfold. The council room was silent except for the low hum of tense breathing. The elders were seated around a heavy oak table, their faces drawn and pale. Every line on their faces spoke of guilt, regret, and fear. The air felt thick, suffocating, as Danzo's shadow loomed over them, even though he wasn't present. His tyranny was everywhere. The echoes of his commands and punishments were felt in every corner of the pack. One elder shifted in his seat, his hands clenched tightly on the table, his voice trembling. "We've made a terrible mistake." The others nodded, but no one dared to speak louder than a whisper. They had brought Danzo into power, hoping for strength for order, but instead, they had unleashed a monster, a tyrant who crushed dissent with brutal force. The pack was living in fear, and the elders, now powerless, could only watch as Danzo dismantled everything they had once held dear. "None of this was what we intended," another elder muttered. "We wanted strength, but not at the cost of our souls." "No," Talon, the eldest, said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We wanted control, and we thought he could give us that. Now look at what we've done." Another elder, her face twisted in worry, spoke up. "We need to bring Lyra back." A hush fell over the room. Lyra, the true alpha, the one who had once held the pack together with love and compassion. The one they had turned their backs on in favor of Danzo's forceful methods. "Lyra would never come back," one elder argued, shaking his head. "She left us. She left because of him. She'll never return to this madness." "But we need her," Talon said, slamming his hand on the table in frustration. "We've let this go too far. We were wrong. We need Lyra." The room fell silent, and then, as if they had all come to a collective, though unspoken, agreement, they turned to Lucas, who had been silently watching from the doorway. He stepped forward, looking at each elder in turn. "Please," Lucas said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. "You know what's happening. Danzo has pushed this pack to the edge. Lyra, she's the only one who can stop him. We need to ask her to come back." The elders exchanged uncertain glances, but none spoke up. They were afraid of Danzo, afraid of their own choices. They had abandoned Lyra for a leader who now crushed their voices. "I'll go to her," Lucas said, his jaw set in determination. "I'll beg her to come back. I'll remind her of what we had, what we can still have." Lucas walked through the quiet forest, the weight of his mission pressing heavily on his shoulders. He had been to the cottage where Lyra now lived with the lone wolf, and every step toward it felt like a step into the unknown. When he arrived, he found her outside, sitting on a bench, her hands resting in her lap. The peacefulness of the moment struck him. She had found solace here, far from the violence and chaos of leadership. The life she had chosen was different, quieter. She had found peace. But was it enough? "Lyra," Lucas called softly, stepping forward. She turned to face him, her expression guarded. "Lucas," she said quietly, standing. "I didn't expect to see you." He swallowed hard. "The elders, they're desperate. They need you. The pack is falling apart under Danzo's rule. He's taken everything from us." Lyra shook her head, her eyes cold. "You wanted strength, Lucas. You chose him. Now you have it. The pack wanted a leader who ruled with power, and now you have it. What do you expect me to do?" "We were wrong," Lucas said, his voice low. "We see that now. Danzo is a monster. You know what he's become. The pack needs you, Lyra. I need you. Please." Lyra stood still, her gaze hard. "I left for a reason. I wanted peace. I wanted a life without the bloodshed. You all pushed me away when I needed you. Now you want me back." Her voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. "I'm not that alpha anymore, Lucas." Lucas stepped forward, his voice urgent. "You're the only one who can stop him. You've got to come back. You've got to lead us again. Please." Lyra paused, her chest tight. She wanted to help, wanted to save them, but the weight of leadership, the cost of that life, was too much. She had made her choice, and she couldn't go back. Not to that life. "I can't go back, Lucas," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You all chose him. This is the life you wanted. You wanted a strong hand. Now you've got one. Live with it." Lucas' heart dropped. He had hoped she would come back, but he had known, deep down, she wouldn't. Then, he said something that made Lyra stop in her tracks. "I overheard Danzo. He's planning to kill you." Lyra's stomach churned at his words. "What?" She took a step closer, her voice urgent. "What did you hear?" "He said it himself," Lucas said, his face dark with concern. "He said that he won't be safe as long as you're alive. He plans to kill you. He's afraid you'll take his power away." Lyra's heart raced, a sickening feeling twisting in her gut. Her mind spun with the implications. "He wants me dead," she whispered. "But why?" "Because if you come back, he loses everything. He won't have full control." Her gaze hardened. "He's a coward." Lucas nodded. "He's dangerous, and he'll do anything to keep his power. He's already lost himself in his thirst for control." Lyra clenched her fists, the urge to fight rising within her. She had always been strong enough to face whatever came her way, but this was different. She could fight Danzo. She could take him on, but there was one thing that made her hesitate, Kai. She looked at Lucas, her voice barely a whisper. "What about Kai?" Lucas' expression softened. "He's part of this, Lyra. I can't promise you he'll be safe if you decide to face Danzo." Lyra's heart twisted. She wanted to fight, wanted to put an end to Danzo's tyranny, but the risk to Kai was unbearable. She couldn't do it. Not yet. "I'm sorry," Lyra whispered. "I can't risk it. I can't put him in danger." The pack was spiraling into chaos under Danzo's cruel reign. His actions were becoming more brutal by the day, and the elders were paralyzed by fear, knowing they had brought this destruction upon themselves. The pack was trapped in a cycle of terror, loyalty gained by violence, and silence born of fear. As Lyra looked out at the life she had chosen, the weight of her decision pressed heavily on her. The pack she had once led, the people she had once protected, now they were being crushed under Danzo's power. But no matter how much she wanted to fight, the consequences of that fight, the loss of her love and her peace, were too much to bear. Her decision to leave had come with a cost. The cost of love, the cost of peace, the cost of watching her pack suffer. The price of choosing freedom over duty had never been clearer. And now, with Danzo's cruelty growing, Lyra had to face the true cost of her choices. But she couldn't go back. Not now. Not for the pack. Not for anyone.
Chapter 9.
Lyra sat in the dimly lit room of their cottage, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of a clay cup. She had found solace here with Kai, in the quiet, peaceful life they had built away from the pack's turmoil. Yet, despite the calm of the cottage, her heart was restless. The weight of her past lingered, and every day the thought of her people, her pack, gnawed at her. Kai stood by the window, his eyes scanning the horizon, his back rigid, as if he were holding something back. He turned to her, his voice low but firm. "You know what's happening out there," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "Danzo is destroying them, Lyra. The pack needs you. You can't ignore it forever." Lyra sighed, her gaze falling to the ground. "I'm not the alpha anymore. I made my choice. I can't go back to that life." Kai took a step forward, his presence commanding but gentle. "You left because you believed in peace, but what's happening now is worse than anything Danzo could do. He's tearing the pack apart. You know this. You know they need you." Lyra's heart tightened. "I can't go back, Kai. I'm happy now. I'm with you. I found something I never thought I would have. Peace. Love. I can't risk it all." Kai's gaze softened, and he walked toward her, sitting down beside her on the couch. His hand found hers, his fingers warm against hers. "I know you're happy, Lyra. I can see it in your eyes. But you're more than just mine. You're their alpha. You were their leader. I know it's hard, but if you walk away, everything you've worked for will be lost." Lyra shook her head, the words catching in her throat. "I didn't want this, Kai. I didn't want this burden. It's too much. I've already seen what happens when a leader like me tries to carry it all. I'm not the leader they need anymore. You don't get to decide that, Lyra, Kai said, his voice insistent but gentle. You don't get to run from who you are. You may not want to be their alpha, but you are their alpha. They need you to stop this madness. You need to stop it. Lyra's chest tightened, her breath shallow. I can't go back to that, Kai. I can't be the one to lead them in battle again. I can't be the one to carry that weight. Not again. He leaned in, his forehead gently touching hers, his breath warm against her skin. But you are the one who can stop it. You've always had that strength in you, Lyra. And I'll be here. We'll face it together. I won't let you fight this alone. Lyra pulled away slightly, her eyes searching his. And if it means losing everything we've built here? If it means losing you? Losing this? Kai smiled, his hand cupping her cheek. If you go back, I'll be with you. I won't let you do this alone. But I will never make you choose me over them. I only want you to choose what's right. And I know you'll do that. You're not running anymore. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She had always known, deep down, that her duty to her people would call her back. But the fear of losing the life she had with Kai, the life that felt so right, was a wound she didn't want to reopen. Please, Kai whispered, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Don't let Danzo have this power. Don't let him destroy the pack. Lyra's breath hitched, and for a moment, all the noise from the world outside faded. She leaned into him, her body pressed against his, her voice trembling. I don't want to lose you, Kai. I don't want to lose this. She whispered it, barely audible, her heart laid bare in the vulnerability of the moment. Kai kissed her forehead softly, his arms pulling her closer. You won't lose me. But you'll lose yourself if you don't step up. They sat there in silence for a long moment, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air. Lyra closed her eyes, letting herself be held by Kai, feeling the safety of his embrace. The comfort of being loved, of being seen for who she was, made the decision even harder. But in that silence, Lyra knew what had to be done. I can't let them suffer, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't let Danzo keep doing this. Kai smiled softly, kissing her forehead. Then let's face this together. We'll fight for them, for the future they deserve. Lyra took a deep breath, the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders, but for the first time in a long while, she felt clarity. She knew what she had to do. She would return, not just for her people, but for herself, for the future she believed in. The quiet in the room was broken only by the sound of their shared breath, the love they shared, and the realization that her true calling, her duty to the pack, could no longer be ignored. As they held each other, the final decision was made. Lyra would return. She would fight for the pack's future and for the love she had with Kai. Lyra stood at the edge of the forest, the weight of a decision heavy in her chest. The full moon was only 3 days away, and the challenge of the ancient Amatasuki, the trial of leadership, loomed over her. The pack had already felt the tension building, murmurs of a challenge, and what it meant for their future. 4 days now. Lyra had been training hard, preparing herself physically and mentally. But no amount of training could prepare her for the emotional toll that was starting to press on her. She had been holding on to the hope that things could be resolved peacefully, but Danzo's refusal to step down had shattered that possibility. The pack was divided, and now the only way to prove herself was through combat. Her heart ached thinking of Kai, and the last thing she wanted was for him to suffer the consequences of her choices. She had tried to keep him away from this, but the truth was unavoidable. She loved him more than she could put into words, and now she might never see him again. Earlier in the day, a visit from Lucas. Lucas, battered and bruised, had staggered into the cottage earlier that afternoon. His body bore the marks of a brutal attack, his face swollen, his side bruised where he had been struck. Lyra rushed to his side, fear gnawing at her gut. What happened? She asked, hands trembling as she tried to steady him. Lucas grimaced, wincing with every movement. I was followed, Lyra. They knew where I'd been. Someone saw me leaving here. They know I've been with you. Lyra's heart sank. Who saw you? I don't know, but I was leaving here, and I saw them in the shadows. They know. I'm sure Danzo knows, and when he finds out, there's no telling what he'll do. You've got to fight for them, Lyra, Lucas had said, his voice weak but determined. The pack is falling apart under Danzo. You're the only one who can stop him. She had nodded, the decision already set in her mind. I will. I'll claim my place as their true alpha. Kai had been quiet, watching her as she prepared for the coming battle. The weight of it all settled on her shoulders, and the once peaceful life she had built with him felt like it was slipping away. Kai stepped closer, taking her hand in his. You don't have to do this, Lyra. You've built a life here. You've found happiness. You don't need to go back to that world. Lyra shook her head, her heart heavy with the truth. I can't let them suffer. Danzo won't stop. He'll destroy everything. I have to do this for them. But what about us? Kai's voice broke slightly, the vulnerability in his eyes mirroring her own. What about us, Lyra? I can't bear the thought of losing you. Lyra gently cupped his face, her thumb tracing the sharp lines of his jaw. Kai, I love you. I truly do. But I can't turn my back on them. They need me, and I need to do this. If anything happens to me, I want you to know, our love was worth every moment. It's been worth it all. Tears welled up in her eyes as she pulled him close, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on her heart. If I die tomorrow, I'll know I gave it my all. I'll know I tried to make things right. But Kai, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you. Kai kissed her forehead softly, his arms wrapping around her tightly. You're not going to die, Lyra. I won't let that happen. You'll come back to me. You have to. Lyra pulled away, just enough to look into his eyes. No matter what, I love you. And I will fight. For the pack. For us. Kai pulled her into a kiss, their lips meeting in a deep, lingering embrace. In that moment, they both knew this could be their last time together. He held her as if he never wanted to let go, and she responded with all the love and passion she had left to give. The full moon rose high, casting its silver glow over the sacred grounds where the trial would take place. The pack gathered, standing in silence, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The ancient battleground was marked by a circle of stone, a place where only the strongest, the most worthy would fight to claim the title of Alpha. Danzo stood at one side of the ring, surrounded by his followers, his posture rigid and confident. His eyes were cold, and the sneer on his lips made it clear he wasn't going to back down without a fight. Lyra stood opposite him, a sense of calm resolve settling over her as she faced the challenge ahead. She had trained hard, knowing that this battle would be the most important fight of her life. It was a battle not just for leadership, but for the future of the pack. She was ready. This is it, Lyra, Kai whispered, his voice tight with emotion as he stood on the sidelines, watching her. Don't forget who you are. Don't let him break you. She nodded, her eyes never leaving Danzo as he taunted her with his arrogant stance. I won't. I'm ready. The pack remained silent, knowing that the outcome of this trial would decide their future. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The fight would begin at the rise of the moon, and only one would stand as the true alpha. The tension was palpable as the full moon reached its zenith, signaling the start of the trial of leadership. Both Danzo and Lyra stood ready, the air between them charged with unspoken hostility. The fight was about to begin, and the future of the pack hung in the balance.
Chapter 10.
The full moon bathed the battleground in its cold, silvery light as the Amatasuki trial began. The pack watched in complete silence, 1,000 eyes on the two alphas, one standing proud in arrogance, the other a leader born of wisdom and determination. Lyra's heart raced in her chest, the tension making every muscle in her body tighten. She was ready. There was no turning back now. Danzo stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with malice. You should have stayed away, Lyra, he sneered. You think you can take what's mine? Your time is over. Lyra stood firm, her body coiled like a spring, her gaze never wavering from his. The pack needs peace, Danzo. You rule through fear, but I lead with trust. This ends tonight." With a roar, Danzo lunged forward, his massive frame charging at her with brutal force. He threw a powerful punch, aiming for her head, but Lyra ducked, her body flowing with a grace that belied her strength. She dodged, only to counter with a swift kick to his side, knocking him off balance. The sound of his body hitting the ground echoed across the clearing. The pack shifted nervously, some of them inching forward in excitement, others backing up in fear. The battle had begun, and there was no going back. Danzo growled, regaining his stance, eyes wild with fury. He charged again, faster this time, using his size and strength to his advantage. He grabbed for Lyra's arm, twisting it with a vicious snap. The sharp pain shot through her, but she gritted her teeth and fought through it, her mind focused, calculating. Lyra used his momentum against him, spinning her body with the force of a twist, sending him crashing into the dirt again. She landed lightly on her feet, her claws unsheathed, eyes locked on her enemy. She was in control now, her movements precise and calculated. With a fierce growl, Danzo got up, blood dripping from his lip, and charged once more, but this time Lyra was ready. She knew he would come at her with everything he had. As he reached her, she sidestepped, grabbing his arm mid-strike, and using his weight to throw him over her shoulder. Danzo hit the ground hard, his chest heaving as he struggled to regain his breath. Lyra stood above him, sweat dripping down her face, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath. She was faster, smarter, and more composed. But Danzo was relentless, his desire for power burning in his eyes. He got to his feet again, bloody but far from defeated. "You can't win, Lyra," he spat, his voice filled with venom. "I'll break you. I'll show them all that I'm the true alpha." Lyra locked eyes with him, her voice unwavering. "You can keep fighting, Danzo, but you're already defeated. The pack sees the truth now." She took a step forward, her claws extended, ready to end the battle. But then, in a flash, she made a decision. She would not kill him. She would show mercy, something Danzo would never understand. With one swift move, she disarmed him, knocking him to the ground with a brutal slam of her fist. Danzo gasped, his eyes filled with rage, but Lyra stood above him, holding his gaze with the full weight of her leadership. "I won't kill you, Danzo," she said, her voice cold but full of authority. "But your reign ends here. You're exiled. Leave now and never return." Danzo's face twisted with fury, but he knew the fight was over. His ambition had been crushed, his power ripped from him. Slowly, he stumbled to his feet, his pride battered but still intact, though his eyes seethed with hatred. "You haven't seen the last of me, Lyra," he muttered, but there was no conviction behind his words. With one final, venomous glare, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the forest, never to return. The pack remained silent, and for a long moment there was only the sound of Lyra's heavy breaths. She stood tall, the weight of the victory settling in her bones. The full moon above seemed to shine brighter now, as if acknowledging the triumph of the rightful alpha. As Danzo's exile became a reality, the pack slowly began to gather around Lyra. They hesitated, some still uncertain, but most of them recognized the truth. They had been freed from the tyranny of a leader who ruled with fear. Now, they had the chance to rebuild. Lyra walked to the center of the gathering, her heart heavy with the responsibility that had always come with her position, but a sense of peace washed over her. The fight had been brutal, but she had fought not just for power, but for peace, for the future of her people. "I am your alpha," she said, her voice loud and clear, carrying across the pack. "We have a chance to rebuild, to be strong together. But we must do it with unity and trust. I lead not through force, but through understanding. This is our future, and I will guide us to it." There was a moment of stillness before the pack began to shift, some stepping forward in support, others still unsure. But among them, there were those who believed in her, who trusted her. Slowly, the murmur of approval spread, and the pack began to rally behind her once more. Lyra's eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on Kai, who stood off to the side, watching her with a look of quiet pride. She walked toward him, the weight of everything they had fought for sinking in. They had done it. They had won, not just for themselves, but for the pack. As she reached him, she smiled softly. "We've got a lot of work to do, but we'll do it together." Kai nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of love and determination. Together. The moon shone brightly above them, and as Lyra reclaimed her position as the true alpha, the future seemed uncertain, but full of possibility. The pack was still healing, but with Lyra's leadership, they had a chance to rebuild their unity and restore peace to the fractured pack. The moon had risen high above the pack's territory, casting its soft light over the camp. The previous weeks had been filled with rebuilding and repairing the damage Danzo had caused. Lyra stood at the center of it all, her gaze scanning the wolves who were slowly coming back together. She had fought for this moment, fought to restore the peace, to bring the pack back to its former glory. Now, with Danzo gone, it was up to her to guide them forward. Lyra had called a meeting of the pack, and the wolves gathered around her with quiet anticipation. They still bore the marks of the fear Danzo had instilled in them, but the tension in the air was lessened. It was time for change. "We will no longer live under fear," Lyra began, her voice carrying through the gathered wolves. "Danzo's rule is over, and it will never return. We will rebuild what was broken, and we will do it with unity and trust." There was a murmur of agreement, some wolves still skeptical, others nodding with quiet resolve. Lyra knew the road to healing would be long. Many were still unsure of her leadership, still unsure if she could truly lead them without the ruthless strength Danzo had relied on. But she wasn't going to lead through fear. She would show them the power of unity, of leading with compassion. "Each of you is essential to our future. We will move forward as a pack, stronger than before. We will ensure that everyone has a voice, that our future is shaped together." Lyra's words filled the air, and for the first time in months, there was a sense of hope among the wolves. The hardest part of the journey was just beginning, but she had made the first step. They would rebuild together, and she would guide them. She would make sure they would never fall into the darkness again. Lyra sat by the window, her hand resting gently over her stomach as she gazed out into the night. Kai joined her, his presence a quiet comfort at her side. There had been so much happening, the pack's restoration, the struggles of leadership, but something inside her had shifted. The future, once uncertain, had begun to reveal new paths, and now, with each passing day, a new layer of responsibility was settling in her heart. Kai placed a gentle hand over hers, his touch soft and reassuring. "How are you holding up, my love?" Lyra turned to face him, her eyes filled with both determination and uncertainty. "I've made my choice. I'm leading them, our pack. They need me." She paused, her heart beating heavily as she spoke. "But it's more than that now, Kai. It's not just about leadership anymore. There's something else, something bigger growing inside me." Kai's eyes widened in surprise as realization dawned. "Lyra, are you saying?" Lyra nodded, a gentle smile spreading across her face as she looked down at her hand resting on her stomach. "I'm pregnant, Kai. We're going to have a child." The room seemed to still around them, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Kai placed his hand gently over hers, his eyes glistening with emotion. Kai began, his voice thick with emotion. "I never imagined this. I'm so glad, Lyra. But at the same time, I know things are about to change in ways we can't predict." Lyra smiled softly, her heart swelling with love for him and their unborn child. "Things have already changed, Kai, but I believe in our future. We'll face it together." There was a long pause as they simply sat together, the magnitude of the moment settling between them. Lyra, as the pack's true alpha, had fought so hard to restore peace. Now, she would have to balance leadership with the responsibilities of being a mother. Her new life, and the pack's, were intertwined in ways she could never have anticipated. Lyra stood in front of the pack, her presence commanding the attention of every wolf present. There were still whispers of uncertainty, but they were fewer now. She had faced the trials and the battles, both internal and external, and now she stood ready to lead them into a new era. "Tonight we begin again. I'm not just your alpha, Lyra said, her voice ringing with confidence and love. "I'm your protector, your mother and your leader. We will rebuild, we will restore trust, and we will create a future where every wolf is valued." There were no protests, no murmurs of doubt. For the first time in a long while, the pack felt the stirrings of unity. The path forward would be hard, but Lyra was ready. As she looked out at the pack, her eyes briefly met Kai's. They both knew the journey ahead was uncertain, but they would face it together as a family. The battle had been fought and won, but the challenges were far from over. With the restoration of peace came new responsibilities, and Lyra knew that leading a pack would be more complex than she had ever imagined. She was no longer just fighting for leadership. Now, she was fighting for her family, her future, and the pack she had always loved. As she moved forward, her strength, wisdom, and compassion would guide the pack through this new chapter, and as the moon shone brightly above, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with everything she had, because now, she wasn't just leading for herself, but for the future she was building with Kai and their child.
Thank you for being a part of this great family and showing love to the author. We hope you enjoyed this, and we plan to release more videos as soon as we can. For now, like, share, comment and subscribe.